the Buzzway is attempting to do is just that initial ask of, hey, where do we think suitable pollinator habitat might be in the Rogue Valley? That really opens up a lot of opportunities, and GIS is just a natural fit for making that a little bit more interactive because people can zoom in and say, oh cool, there's a lot of people around me who have pollinator friendly habitats, or oh gosh, my garden is really really important because it's kind of in an isolated desert, or an isolated little patch in the desert of urbanization. So it's great for reinforcing to people the value of these pollinator friendly habitats.
From the Oregon State University Extension Service, this is PolliNation, a podcast that tells the stories of researchers, land managers, and people like you who are making bold strides to improve the health of pollinators. I'm your host, Dr. Adoni Malathopoulos, Associate Professor of Pollinator Health in the Department of Horticulture. There are some great initiatives in Oregon to get pollinator habitat into the ground. If you recall, back in October, we talked with Colleen Rockwell with the Milwaukee Pollinator Pathway outside of Portland. But this week, we head to Southern Oregon to hear about another great initiative that's using maps to help connect the dots of pollinator habitat in the region. The Southern Oregon Buzzway is a collaboration between Southern Oregon University and a community group, Pollinator Project Rogue Valley. They are mapping areas with native plants across a corridor extending from the California border up to Grants Pass and using story maps to help inspire others to cultivate native plants to help bees, butterflies, moths, and other pollinators in the region. We're joined by Dr. Jamie Trammell, who is a landscape ecologist, associate professor, and chair of the Environmental Science Policy and Sustainability Department at Southern Oregon University. Leo Helm, who's a senior in the Environmental Science and Policy program at Southern Oregon University, and Christine Lefevre, who is the president and volunteer director of projects at Pollinator Project Rogue Valley. Southern Oregon is a real treasure when it comes to wild pollinators, so these efforts to inspire and provide resources to these Oregonians are likely to have tremendous impacts. So without further ado, let's head down to the Rogue River Valley this week on PolliNation. I'm so pleased to be heading down to Southern Oregon this week to talk about a really remarkable initiative with Christina, Jamie, and Leo. Welcome to PolliNation.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I guess maybe starting with Christina, can you describe the idea behind a buzzway and why it's so important to the Rogue Valley?
Yeah, thanks. It's a good question. We were a grassroots group back in 2016, and it seemed like there was something that needed to be done about the decline in the pollinators. And it seemed like the easiest way to highlight that was to tell people what their neighbors were doing. So we didn't really know what we were doing, what that meant. So we went and talked to Jamie Trammell, Dr. Jamie Trammell at SOU, to see if there was something that we could do to talk to people about buzzway, or about pollinator gardens rather. And then we came up with a way to create it on a map. And this was, back in probably the earlier days of GIS mapping. And so it seemed like a simple way to highlight the people that were doing the good work already for the pollinators with gardens, and then inspire other people to take that on. And because all of us knew that connectivity is such an important thing for any creature, and especially pollinators. Even though they can fly, they have to have a wide range for their gene and also for the reproduction, so they don't, just get caught up in these little islands. And so it seemed like a great way to start publicizing into our community. And we wanted to make it uber local, making it appropriate for the Rogue Valley and the people who live here, rather than thinking, oh, I'm just some little teeny tiny dot on this big expanse of the United States. So yeah, it seemed like it was a good way to get started as a tiny little initiative that would make a difference, we hope.
Thanks, Christina. Jamie, tell us a little bit more about how your vision as you sort of started off on this initiative.
Sure. Yeah. So it was, yeah, I met Christina probably in my first week or two of landing at Southern Oregon University, and was quickly introduced to her, and as the new GIS professor, was told that she had some project ideas. She had some needs and some interests and some project ideas, and wanted to know if GIS could help solve it. And so through a couple of conversations, decided, yep, this is a good fit. We can start coming up with a proposal, and connected with an intern, a student
Mhm.
intern who had just completed one of the GIS classes, and wanted to kind of test out his skills. And so he started humbly with not a lot of information, just a couple of responses on a survey, and started building that database and building that map, and it looked real good, and it was kind of fixed. And after a couple of months or a year or so, we're like, well, let's make this more dynamic and a little bit more interactive for folks to go and explore. And so launched kind of this, I don't know, a lineage of interns who have been working on this Buzzway project, since that first intern, that have now taken it online. They've done some analyses. They've helped kind of guide where Way has evolved in terms of an engagement tool and as a scientific tool. And so now it lives fully online, and it's integrated. It's live updates. And what this allows us to do is just really capture, we're basically putting more citizens in scientific capacities, right? We're gathering more data. There's only so many scientists. There's only so many sensors, but if we can start to employ citizens, the concept behind citizen science, and that's really what the Buzzway is attempting to do, is just that initial ask of, hey, where do we think suitable pollinator habitat might be in the Rogue Valley? That really opens up a lot of opportunities, and GIS is just a natural fit for making that a little bit more interactive, because people can zoom in and say, oh cool, there's a lot of people around me who have pollinator friendly habitats, or oh gosh, my garden is really really important because it's kind of an isolated desert, or an isolated little patch in the desert of urbanization. So it's great for reinforcing to people the value of these pollinator friendly habitats.
Oh, thanks so much. And Leo, why don't you tell us about this? I think part of this integration with the what's been built over time is this story map. What is the story map of the Buzzway, and how do you hope this map is going to help build the Buzzway over time?
Mhm. So the story map is separate from what we've had as like the Rogue Buzzway so far. Story map is like a particular kind of product developed by Esri, like a GIS tool that's used to kind of add new dimension to like these maps. We wanted to use the story map to kind of show some of the stories that are actually people who are on the busway, because sorry, the busway on its own is just a lot of data, and we're trying to add like another layer on top of that that
Mhm.
shows what's actually going on the ground.
So it takes GIS. I mean, I imagine in my head dots on a map, but it's more than dots on the map. There's the dots have some. I guess when you look at them, they tell you something about. Describe what happens when somebody hovers over one of these dots. What do they learn?
Mhm.
Yeah, so when someone fills out the busway survey, they provide a lot of information about their garden, and
Mm-hmm.
not all of that is easy to see when you're looking at the busway map. So by hovering over it, you can see like the kind of native plant coverage that people have, their history of pesticide use, how long this garden has been a native
Oh,
like habitat, which is really valuable information for when you're considering how habitat connectivity has changed in Southern Oregon.
fantastic. Well, Christina, how do you see this story map functioning in the sort of broader aim that you talked about of getting more people to?
Yeah, I think the story map per se, which as Leo said is like a different tool, it's so much more expansive, it's so much more personal, because the story map, when you look at it, there's like three personal stories, but it's honing in on how the Rogue Buzzway is really tying those stories together. And, we all know that we learn best through stories. So watching what happened in somebody's garden from the beginning to the end, and this little teeny snippet that Leo puts in the Buzzway map is informative and it's interesting. And so maybe what's going to happen, what I'm hoping is happening, is that people will feel inspired. Oh, they did that. Well, I can do that too. So that's one, I think, one of the reasons to have a story map. And even the Buzzway, Leo mentioned you click on or hover over the little dot, you can get information. You can find out if it's a monarch way station or if it's has an orchard or, some of the other information that's in the survey. And it is really great information so that we can see what people have and how that is supporting pollinators. But of course, it's not just pollinators, it's the birds and the other creatures that live here. So helping to build an ecosystem. So the Buzzway, if you think about it, if you look at it on the map, it starts at the base, the bottom of Oregon, just south of Ashland, and it goes all the way now to Grants Pass, through following the I-5 corridor, but then of course going off east and west. And so what is theoretically possible, and I'm hoping it is really true, factual, is that a butterfly, for instance, could fly from the monument, the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument, all the way to Grants Pass and be able to find not only food, but also native plants that she could lay her eggs for the next generation. So, in some ways, the map doesn't really matter because theoretically these gardens are going to be there anyway. And so they're there. So it's all fine. But putting the story together on a way that humans can see it visually, big picture, I think is really the key here. And then, Leo and I are talking about other story maps. So maybe we do one about just the monarch evolution. Maybe we do one about, I don't know, some other places on the map that are critical. One of the things we haven't talked about yet is, most people probably know about the Alameda fire of 2020 and the devastation that it caused to this area. So when you look on the map, there's the outline, the fire scar. So how is that getting filled in? One of our programs is helping with that, and a lot of other people are helping with that, putting back in plants, not always natives and certainly not always pollinators, but how is that fire scar getting restored?
I recall we had a podcast with the Milwaukee Pollinator Pathway, and I remember the comment there being, in some ways, you're kind of doing pollinator garden on your own, but suddenly you can look and it's like, oh, there are peers, there are people
Yeah.
around who I can talk to, I can network with. Maybe, Jamie, that comes to your comment about citizen science, kind of
Mm-hmm.
drawing people together into something where they start to say, oh yeah, we could, if we
Mm-hmm.
recruited a few more neighbors, have that corridor that connects the monument to Grants Pass.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny that, I mean, just we're such a spatial species,
Hmm.
but we operate on a day-to-day basis more in that first person perspective spatial view, but oftentimes it's a totally different, enlightening perspective to kind of zoom out and look at the broader region. And that's what GIS does, and that's what these maps allow you to do, is just put your own efforts in the context of surrounding efforts. And boy, is that reassuring and really helpful for
Mm-hmm.
so many people to think about. Oh gosh, there's awesome connectivity, there's awesome potential for conservation here in the Rogue Valley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we're so, fortunate to live here, and the huge diversity here in this Klamath-Siskiyou region, and getting people to see that connectivity from the wildlands to the urban cores, I think is important. And the Buzzway can show how that is actually happening or how it's not. The fire scar took out a whole bunch of stuff. But then there's also a lot of places where maybe we need to be looking at, what can a community do and say, oh, maybe we could add a couple of, some of our neighbors, maybe we should start a pollinator garden.
Mhm.
That's fantastic. I think that kind of, especially coming out of such a catastrophe and kind of
Mm-hmm.
pooling resources and thinking about how to, as Jamie said, think spatially about these issues
Yeah.
is really great. And I guess, Leo, I wanted to come back as somebody who I imagine gets these surveys and gets these applications. What have been some success stories? What have been, some, stories of what people have done that has inspired you, and kind of peering into individual efforts at making this corridor?
Yeah. Well, like we were just talking about, there are some that I liked or I wanted to highlight on the story map because they were just really inspiring, I imagine, to people who want to start their own garden and get on the buzzway. One we featured on the story map was someone who just built her pollinator garden up from nothing using not very many resources. So it's cool that you can to see that that can be done around here, and we're hoping it reaches other people
Mhm.
in a similar situation. And then there are uh, success stories that tie into PPRV's other programs. I think Christina will be able to tell you about the From Fire to Flowers program, where people affected by the Almeida fire can get pollinator gardens installed.
Mhm.
And we're hoping that people see how easy that is to, I guess, receive the benefits of that program.
Mhm.
Yeah, I guess it's nice because it plugs. People are left with this, the situation of, we have to rebuild, and to be able to get those resources, be aware of them, and have a
Mhm.
plan to put them in place. I guess these story map snippets are really inspiring. You can say, "Oh, I could see something. I could
Mhm.
envision how this would be done."
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Well, Christina, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of those initiatives as well that you've experienced, and
Yeah, and I was just thinking maybe we need a story map about all the From Fire to Flower gardens. Anyway, back to your question. So yeah, I think the From Fire to Flower garden program, pollinator garden program, is the one that comes to mind the most because that really is fitting in with the Buzzway. After the fire happened, you know, knowing how much was devastated, 2,000 2,500 structures and what 2,000 acres, is that right, the right number, something like that, a lot of it along the greenway, a lot of it along riparian areas, but it took out so many homes and so many yards. And so what do you do? And give somebody a plant, but that doesn't seem very effective. And so we got to the point where we could look at helping people actually plant. So we work with the homeowners. We have done one business helping them with the design, figuring out what they like. We source the plants either from our own propagation nursery where we grow native plants, and then we also ask for either at a discount or often donations from some of the local nurseries like Plant Oregon and Shooting Star, Clamasistu Native Seeds, because we're trying to do only natives because we know that people will, sooner or later put in non-natives, which is fine. That's their garden. But we're really focusing on the natives to help all the native pollinators, the butterflies, the bees, beetles, et cetera, et cetera. And so we work with the homeowner. Sometimes there's the things that need to be done, like build a wall or doing some sheet mulching to get rid of some grass or something like that. And then we have some people that we're working with, and because we are getting some grant funding, not quite enough, but we are getting some grant funding, we're actually able to compensate the experts. So we have a designer, and then we have they work together.
oh,
We have two
great.
people working with that, and then we have installation day with volunteers. So just a couple of weeks ago, we did 2 gardens in one day. That was the first time we've ever done it. One in Phoenix and then one in Ashland. They're both great. And so that's number 15 and 16 that we've put in
Oh,
since
wow.
2021. And the one garden that Leo has highlighted on the story map is a lovely story. It's amazing how quickly pollinators can come back. Christie's garden, we planted hers in May, and by September, it looked like it had been there for a long time, and you had blooming asters, and it just really looked lovely. So the homeowners generally help us, and so now in that Bear Creek Mobile Home Park, I think we've put in 6 gardens, and then that's creating a buzzway right there in that little mobile home park right next to the Bear Creek, which is obviously a riparian corridor throughout the valley. So just these little gardens is helping to make the stepping stones and help restore back to maybe a little bit of what used to be here.
I'm sure people are wanting to know what are some of the kind of most reliable, for people who may be new to this, some of the most reliable, easy plants. What are your kind of like top 5 plants that everybody can grow and work well? And
Well, the first thing I should say is it depends. because it depends on how much sun, how much water, et cetera, et cetera. But if I had to choose five, thank you for five and not just one, then I would say Oregon sunshine, goldenrod. Those are two beautiful flowering plants. If you want to go with a shrub, if you can do a manzanita, if not, then let's see off the top of my head what ceanothus would be super great. Let's see, I have one more, right? A native grass.
I could add something if you want.
Yeah, please do.
I wanted to say something about like agriculture because we have a few farms on the Buzzway. It's something that we ask about on the survey. I'm sure listeners of this podcast will know the importance of pollinators to agriculture in general. But it's yeah, I think we were wanting to support like farms who are able to put in native pollinator plantings. We highlighted one on the story map, but there are a few on the Buzzway that are doing this. And it's important to kind of highlight those farms that are taking those measures to improve like our local food system. I don't know. Didn't
No, I think it's really important. I actually just picked up a can of tomatoes the other day, and it said it was, it was the Xerces bee friendly certified, and I was like, oh, I'm
nice.
happy to get some bee tomatoes. That'd be awesome. And so I imagine as well down, there's so many great small farms in in the Rogue Valley that kind of giving them, when I've met farms in the Rogue Valley, I've noticed that the small farms down there are super interested in sustainable farming and conservation. And so I imagine this is something that they're really excited to partner in with.
Yeah, Bluebird Farm in Williams is the one that we featured on the story map. And they put pollinator plantings in between their rows of crops, and they're all organic. And the produce goes back to the community, it goes to local co-ops. I've got their carrots at the Ashland Co-op. They're pretty good.
Yeah, I think the agriculture is an important part of it. So I'm glad you brought that up, Leo. And Hi-Ho does have good carrots, I have to say. Maybe I'm not supposed to say that on the air. I'm not sure.
Oh no! If it's a good carrot, the world should know.
That's right. And I think it's great that Xerces, and I think the Oregon Bee Project also. You have a program that is encouraging the farmers to plant the plants for the pollinators and the beneficial insects. So I'm
Yeah, and
glad to
I think
see.
Pollinator Partnership also. There's a couple of them out there but I think a lot of those are, like I was thinking about the can of tomatoes. It's like it's really at a huge scale, but being able to have a showcasing of local produce and their connection to pollinator, I think that's a missing part. I don't think there's I can't think of a lot of good examples that you're doing down there around the state. So this is really commendable.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, we're not doing a lot yet with putting in a lot of pollinator plants on farms. I don't think specifically for that, like the hedgerows that I know of. Maybe they are happening more than I know of. But I think that would be a really great way to expand on the Buzzway too, and showcase the farmers that are doing that.
Well, I suppose this brings about, we were talking a little bit about favorite plants, and for some people, they're used to heavily fertilizing or having the irrigation on something, and making the shift to native plants can sometimes be it does require a bit of a learning curve. Where do people get resources to learn about how to work with native plants?
Yeah, it is a little bit of a learning curve. Some native plants, of course, are easy for watering, like, the riparian plants. Obviously, they need the moisture on their roots a lot of the time. So depending, again, remember, it depends. If you have more of a wet area, it's easy. I think it's easier because then you get in that mindset of those plants need water. But I personally think it's easy if you have a really dry area, because there's so many plants, especially in Southern Oregon, that really like that. So I mentioned the Oregon sunshine. I mentioned the goldenrod, the ceanothus, the manzanita. I mean, you can put those out, give them some water in the first couple of summers when it's really hot, and then they should really be able to thrive. And I think the other secret that people don't always appreciate about the native plants, because another thing that I think we're wanting people to look at is the aesthetics of a native plant garden. A pollinator garden doesn't have to necessarily just be natives, but a pollinator garden versus an ornamental garden is how those plants move and how the garden changes. So to me, one of the best things about doing a native plant, especially in a garden, is that it will generally grow bigger. It will set seed, and so you end up with free plants. They may be where you may not have wanted them, but the plant wanted to be there. So I think that's, to me, the secret weapon of the native plants. If you can get them established and you are okay with the garden evolving and becoming more what it wants to be, I think that's special. And you learn by doing. You put in a garden or you put in a plant and it didn't quite make it, but maybe it wants to be over somewhere else because of the sun that you didn't take into account, or the wind. And so it can move around and find a better place. So on our website, Pollinator Project Rogue Valley, we have a lot of articles. We have a whole section from OSU about native plants and pollinators. There's links to other articles and videos. There's so other organizations here in the Rogue Valley. There's information about how to create a garden. We have a garden guide. Other organizations have information about the plant. So get interested, plug in, check out our workshops that we're having. The Native Plant Society of Oregon is super great. We have a Siskiyou chapter down here. There's other chapters around. There is the OSU. The Master Gardeners are here in Central Point, and you have your website with all those great webinars. So yeah, check it out. Our demonstration garden, we have that here for people that are local. I guess you start slow.
And I guess you've also sort of tipped, this is sort of my last question is, how does the Buzzway plug into sort of the broader, community efforts, Pollinator Project Rogue Valley being, a real pivotal one. How do you kind of see all the pieces coming together here for the Rogue Valley?
Yeah, for the Buzzway, you mean?
Well, the Buzzway is being kind of like
Yes.
I guess it is an entryway, I suppose, like you said, that there's a way in which you can get into native plant gardening.
Yes.
You see the Buzzway and you're like, oh, I want to get on there. And I suppose you see the story map, but then it sort of is your entryway into sort of broader programming.
Yeah, because, one of the things that I like to think about that Pollinator Project Rogue Valley does so well is we connect people who are interested in the plants and the pollinators. So the Buzzway and what we're trying to do is make those connections. The Buzzway is a spatial map. It's a visual of the gardens, right? But those are also the connections because those are neighbors. And then with the From Fire to Flowers pollinator garden program, we're helping to fill that Buzzway in. And so that's a way that people can participate with From Fire to Flowers. Well, we need plants, right? So where do those plants come from? Well, we have a way that volunteers can help us in our nursery to grow those. We have plant sales. We have a demonstration garden out front. So to me, it seems like Pollinator Project Rogue Valley is helping to put the pieces together. And then you have education on top of that. So we have our Pollinator Pals program where we're getting into schools and, working with community organizations as partners. We're starting to actually plant pollinator gardens in the schoolyards now. So we're getting out there with the younger people, getting them engaged in filling in the Buzzway. And then we also have our Habitat Academy program, so we can get people out, adults, out into Mount Ashland, for instance, and look at the butterflies that maybe will come down to their garden. So,
well, this is fantastic, and we will have links to both the story map and the Pollinator Project Rogue Valley's website in the show notes, so please check it out. It's been a real pleasure talking with you. Keep up the great work down there in that real mecca of pollinators in Southern Oregon.
Thank you, and we would love to have you come down this summer and check us out.
Oh, we're always down. We love it down there.
Oh, good. We'll talk after the show.
Yeah, find us up in the Cascade Siskiyous.
Oh yes, May. That's right. Oh yeah, very good. Thanks so much for having us on.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. Show notes with links from each episode are available at the website pollinationpodcast.oregonstate.edu. I also love hearing from you, and there's a form at the website where you can pop in and say hello and give me feedback. If you want to support the show, remember to leave a rating on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever podcast mothership you use. And finally, if you have the means and you want to help support my lab's effort to document bee biodiversity in Oregon, visit OregonBeeAtlas.org and follow down to the donate button where you can make a tax-deductible donation to the Jerry and Judith Paul Native Pollinator Endowment. Every little bit helps. See you next episode.